just quickly, there we go, that's that voice. Okay, progress. Okay, let's progress then. So just to say, first of all, really, on behalf of the Somerset Bus Partnership, we set up that unofficial organisation in response to the government's announcements about Bus Back Better, because we were very concerned that the timelines were so tight that Somerset County Council, as the Transport Authority, might not get sort of their act together. They did, in fact, but we wanted to put as much pressure on them as possible. And we also wanted to be lobbying on behalf of bus users so that we could have maximum representation and participation. And that's what we've been doing sort of since April, I suppose, is around the time when we sort of got started. But then obviously we realized that what we also needed to compile, because in many cases bus services have been so random, that there are whole areas that are completely neglected. So we also decided that what we needed was to compile details of facilities and services across the county, and therefore networking would be essential, because we as 4 co-chairs across 4 areas of Somerset, we're not really in a position to do that in any detail. So that's kind of where you come in. What we thought was, whether you want to call yourself reps or bus champions or any of those terms, what we really wanted was to be sure that we were inclusive and that we got details about services, potential services, problems with facilities, potential facilities from all the areas covered by the Transport Authority. So this is the first meeting, and there are 3 more planned for the other areas across Somerset. And this is the first meeting when, we won't be able to get into so much detail tonight, but really just need to be sure that you're happy with and clear about the kind of aims that we're talking about, and agree a method of moving forward. So that's that bit. Is that clear? Does that make sense as far as we go? Okay, then what I'd like to ask you to do next is, I thought we could just go round and only spend a minute, and I've already done my bit, but I thought it'd be useful if we went round and just spent a minute introducing ourselves and the area that you're representing, if that's okay. So I'll start at the top on my screen anyway. Peter Travis.
I'm actually not from Sedgemoor. I'm an immigrant for the evening from Mendip, and I'm the co-chair, so the equivalent of Glenn for Mendip. I'm actually a parish councillor in Road, which is a village just outside of Frome.
At last.
Thanks, Peter. Carla Searle.
Thank you, Glenn. Yes, I'm on East Brent Parish Council, and I represent parishioners in East Brent, Edgingworth and Rooksbridge, and we don't have any formal bus service at all. We've only just recently started to trial a number 48 bus that goes from Burnham to Cheddar. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. Anne Fontaine.
Hi, I'm Anne Fontaine. I'm on the Parish Council of Cheddar. We have 2 buses in Cheddar, which go reasonably regularly, but not sufficiently for people to get to work and back again. So people can get from Wells eventually to Weston, and also can go from Cheddar down to Street. But it's not enough to get children backwards and forwards to college. So championing, trying to get rid of the cars and more buses so people travel by bus.
Thanks, Anne. Mark Ford.
Good evening. I represent Breen Parish Council, bus route 20. When it does run, we don't have any buses in the winter on a Sunday, and they finish very early the rest of the year. And also, if there's any roadworks which have any closures, no buses run through Breen at all. So we're pretty isolated for those who want to go on to college or to work.
Thanks. Roy Pumphrey.
Thanks, Glenn. I'm not a parish councillor, but Cannington have asked me to represent them and report back to them. Cannington 4 miles west of Bridgewater is served by the 14 bus, which terminates at Cannington Monday to Saturday. That I think there's an early morning bus that comes in from further west. It's also there's no bus on Sunday, and it's an hourly service weekdays, an hour and a half on Saturdays. And as has been said earlier, it does enable people to get to work at, you know, if they've got a 9 o'clock, perhaps even 8 o'clock work start time, and get back in the evening. But there's nothing nothing running after about 6 or 7 o'clock, which could get you into Bridgewater but not get you back. We also benefit from being, if we want to go to Minehead, the EDF paid for Hinckley Sea community bus, which runs from Minehead to Bridgewater, both directions, 3 times a day, Monday to Friday. But it doesn't enable you to get from Cannington to Bridgewater, because that would be competing with the first bus service, which they don't want to do. So we could do with something a bit more substantial than that.
Thanks, Roy. Michael, Larry, I've never called you Michael before, but anyway, Mick, over to you.
It's always the first time, Glenn. Yeah.
No, I should remember. I'll remember.
Yeah. How do you do, everyone? Councillor Mick Leary, Bridgewater Town Council. In terms of my ward in Bridgewater, there is no bus service in the Victoria ward, so people can't use a bus or get on a bus or travel by bus there, which is fairly central within Bridgewater. I am a big 21 and 21A user, though, often sort of out to North Petherton and so forth, using that service.
Thanks, Mick. Michael. Chris Allen.
Hi, I'm Chris Allen from Burnham and Highbridge Town Council. We do have a number of bus services, but I have had complaints that there's not enough, they're at the wrong time, and well, I've got a list as long as your arm, really. Just general dissatisfaction with the whole bus provision, or lack of thereof.
Thank you. Peter Clayton.
Yes, Peter Clayton. I represent Burnham North. I'm a town district and county councillor. Chris Allen is our official rep, but I'm just here to keep my hand in and show interest in what's going on and try and learn from it. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter, and very welcome. Brian Freestone.
Hello, I'm a representative from Brentnall Parish Council. We have a bus service number 48. Which runs just on Tuesdays and Fridays, and we can go from Brentnall to Cheddar, and there are 4 buses a day. Sorry, three on the way back. The main complaint is we could do with more buses, as many places could, but that's a bit. I'm new to this, so it's all very strange to me. The reason I went on to it, I volunteered, was because I have a daughter who lives in Shipham, and I noticed it goes from Brentnall to Shipham, and it says Cheddar Wood, but in fact it's misleading, because on the timetable Cheddar Wood is nowhere near Shipham, so that stymied me rather. But that's just a minor thing, really.
Thanks, Brian. And just to reassure you, we're all new to this, Brian, and we're, you know, we're seeing it as an essential job, but you know, we're finding our way as to the best way to correct information. So thanks for your input. Yeah, Emily Shaw.
Hi, I'm Emily Shaw, and I represent Badgeworth Parish Council, which covers Tarnock, Badgeworth, and Biddersham. And same as East Brent and Brentnall, there is 1 bus service that goes through twice a week. And the bus stops only cover 2 of the villages and are a considerable walk on a treacherous road to get to.
Thank you. Chris Allen.
I've already introduced myself.
Sorry, it's all right, miss, because I've lost sight of you, Chris. Sorry. Janet Keane.
Oh, good evening, everyone. Janet Keane, Burnham-on-Sea and Highbridge Town Council. On my ward is Highbridge, Burnham Marine, and the northern part, a small part of West Huntsville, the Alston area of West Huntsville. We have the 21 bus that goes from Burnham through Highbridge, then along to Bridgwater. It seems a fairly frequent service, but the timing would not suit commuters or college leavers. But one of the main concerns that has been expressed to me are people who have hospital appointments, even trying to contact the Slinky bus service, which I'm not sure is part of this partnership. It is incredibly expensive to be taken from one's home here in this parish to, say, Musgrove Park Hospital. And for some people, that is almost a no-no for attending for an outpatient appointment. So anything that can be formulated to be flexible and more widespread would be extremely welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've got left now. David Wedgwell, I see, has just arrived. David, do you want to spend just 1 minute, please, just briefly introducing yourself?
I'm David Wedgwell. I work on equalities and diversity issues across the Southwest region and on buses and public transport. And I also happen to do work for the Metro Mayor in Bristol and the Bristol Mayor as well. But we take a regional view on public transport, and certainly at the moment we're trying to deal with Bus Back Better and government funding from a regional perspective, which is the way things are going at the moment for funding. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We've also got one left, is Somerset Bus Partnership. I don't know if is that Lucy?
I just passed them, thanks.
Yeah, okay, thanks. No, I thought you were just doing the recording and stuff. Thanks, Lucy. That's great. And I think that illustrates exactly the point we're making. We couldn't possibly know all that information, the four of us. So if you think about this meeting multiplied by 4, then that's the kind of diversity and important facts that, you know, we need to be gathering. Now, I hope everyone has received, we sent out a template to sort of ask you to collect information for us. Hope everyone's received that. If you haven't, leave your name in the chat box and we'll make sure you get one. That's not set in stone. It's just to get people started. And if you want to add other types of information, you want to change it in any way, that's absolutely up to you. But what we want to use that for is to gather this information, because, you know, we're not going to be able to remember it from tonight, but we've got to do that right across Somerset, and it will be a very valuable sort of encyclopedia of all of the problems with not just buses, not just routes, but also facilities. And that's the sort of information that we want to feed in to the evolving bus service improvement plan after we find out how much the government is going to provide Somerset County Council. So we're right at the beginning, and I hope you appreciate that. And we're also very open to doing it a different way if you have ideas and think we could do better. Before I move on, I just want to mention that we have several areas across Sedgemoor where, although we've tried, we still don't have representatives. And, you know, I think it's important. We've no one from Axbridge, Ashcott, Barrow, East Huntsville. Forgive me if we have, and I'm not up to date. Limpsham, Overstowe, Pollet, Shipham, Spaxton, Burnham Without, Middlezoy and Othery. So we're still lacking representatives. If anyone has any contacts in any of those parishes, please let me know, and we'll you know, we have made telephone calls, we have left email messages, and it may be that people don't want to be involved and they're absolutely entitled to sort of opt out of that, but I'm sure we all agree that it's a useful exercise. So, you know, we'd like to get that information. Are there any questions or comments at this point before we move on? Everybody? Brian?
Yeah, I just wondered if there was any way of having request stops, or is that considered to be too dangerous?
I think we want to have everything discussed, but I don't think this at this meeting tonight. I think, you know, there's so many details, there's so many issues, but put that in your template report,
right? Because
that's obviously very important.
Right. Thank you very much.
Okay,
I have a question.
Janet?
Yes. Is it part of the remit of this meeting to discuss the actual timetabling of the bus services that we've got, so that different services, different locations can link up to make a more comprehensive journey.
You see, I think this is the problem. I think we do want to be discussing all of that. That's why we've sent out the template and asked you to put all those things. We can then draw it together. I think it would take us much too long tonight if we were to go through everybody's individual, very important detail. So if you can put that detail in the template report, and then we can look at it under headings. I think tonight is our first meeting, so I think we're really sort of just getting to grips with how we're going to move forward. But certainly both of those issues are absolutely vital to what we're talking about. Any other comments or questions?
Glyn, just an issue that people should realise, that if they're dealing with Burnham and Highbridge and Western Hospital, the bus contract in that location is set by the North Somerset and West Evening Combined Authority. That's the mirror I'm doing some work for. Bus improvement plan. So I'm just urging anybody from Highbridge and Burnham and parishes that rely on the 20 service to Western, they also need to make contact with North Somerset Council and make sure that their plan is what they want in terms of services to Western and Burnham Hospital, because there's no evenings and no Sunday services at present on that route. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, David. But you can see the problem of us getting down to too much detail tonight. We've only got an hour, and we're setting the framework tonight. So if that's all right. So I can't see anybody else signalling. So can I then move on to Peter Travis, the other co-chair here tonight? And Peter's going to just sort of bring us up to date with where we are now in terms of the bus service improvement plan and what happens next. Okay, Peter?
Yep. Can everyone see this PowerPoint? Can you now see a map of Sedgemoor? Is that okay, Glenn?
That looks great, actually. Yes, I think
Right.
so. Anyone can't speak up now? That looks good.
Okay, so I mean, what was interesting? Well, there was a lot of interest, but what is clearly an issue about buses is that they are so much about detail. And we started off at a county level, we moved on to a district level, but clearly the way forward is working in more local levels so that we can specifically address some of the issues that people have raised this evening. Buses are about detail, and the solution is often a detailed one, and it's a matter of getting the right groups together to advocate a way through to those solutions. And even when one looks at Sedgemoor as an entity, as David would emphasize and has already emphasized, it's very much about cross-border. I've done quite a bit of work in Wales, and I know they're very concerned about their buses into Sedgemoor, and it's already been mentioned this evening about buses from Sedgemoor towards Wales. It's also been mentioned about buses from Bridgewater into Somerset West and Taunton, obviously to places on the coast, but also down to Taunton, and likewise into South Somerset, and also buses and coaches up to Bristol. So yes, this is about Sedgemoor. Yes, it's about the detail within Sedgemoor, but we also have to be aware of the cross-border issues as well. So my role is to put this into some sort of context as to why we are where we are, which might not be the best of places to begin with, but the prospects for going forward are much more encouraging. It has to be said that Somerset has one of the worst bus services in the country. That's partly and significantly because running commercially viable bus services in a rural county like Somerset is very difficult. It also has to be said that grants from central government to Somerset have been cut, particularly during the period of austerity, and priorities have had to be set, and Somerset hasn't prioritised bus services, but maybe that's all about to change. But over the last 10 years, up until the start of COVID, bus journeys per head in Somerset had fallen by 43% in the 10 years. And actually in the last 5 years, they were falling at an even faster rate. It was just about, not the steepest, but close to being the steepest decline anywhere in the country. And it was partly the results of the cuts that Somerset chose to make in bus funding, but that was because their central government funding had been cut and they had to choose priorities. But it did mean that quite a lot of evening bus services and weekend bus services were dropped because they needed support funding. And that then meant quite a lot of people who might have used it for getting back from work, either in the evenings or at weekends, could no longer do that. Journeys per head in Somerset are now significantly lower than any of our neighbouring rural counties, and they've fallen more sharply. And if you look at the 5 worst performing local authorities in the entire country, you'll see that Somerset, in the very latest figures, which were only released last month, has the second lowest bus journeys per head in the country. So that's where we're coming from. And if you thought that was bad, and this is figures which Somerset County Council have recognised as a challenge for them, Somerset bus services have the lowest satisfaction score of any local transport authority in the whole country. And if that wasn't bad enough, of course, COVID did come along. We're faced with COVID. Bus passenger numbers on most routes are operating at something like 70% of the pre-COVID numbers, which is meaning that some of our formerly commercially viable routes are no longer commercially viable at that sort of level of usage. There are driver shortages. Yes, we know about the HGV ones, but now a lot of some bus drivers have been persuaded by big incentives to leave driving buses and go and drive HGVs, which is creating short-term problems for many bus operators, both the big ones and the small ones. On top of that, rising fuel costs that any of us who drive cars will know about, but that's another impact on bus operators, because some people have chosen to opt to drive rather than to go on public transport. It's causing increased traffic congestion, another problem for bus operators. But the really good news, and this is the thing which has changed the whole agenda as far as buses are concerned, is that Boris Johnson really loves buses, and he is a big backer of buses. It comes from being Mayor of London, where he saw the benefits of really good bus services in London, and he has helped drive forward the Bus Back Better initiative, which was launched in March of this year. When people like Glenn and myself and others saw this Bus Back Better initiative, we said we needed to introduce the Somerset Bus Partnership, which we did at more or less the same time, to make sure that local voices, and Glenn's a local voice, I'm a local voice, each of you are local voices, are heard in terms of the way buses in Somerset should go forward. There actually isn't a body of people who are campaigning, battling, asking for more buses, better buses, there wasn't such an organisation, we created one. There is an excellent website and Facebook page called Somerset Catch the Bus campaign. Well worth for those of you who are on Facebook to follow that, because that does give an enormous amount of information, as long as our own Facebook page, Somerset Bus Partnership. But the idea is we wanted to make sure local voices are heard on buses in Somerset. There needed to be a voice for that, not least to argue the case for spending more money in Somerset. Quite remarkably, from a cold start only 6 months ago, we've now got over 100 local area representatives. And obviously we've got a dozen or more on the call this evening. Those local area representatives, we see them as bus champions. Whether you see yourselves as bus champions is a decision for you to make, but there are people who can voice the concerns, as we've heard already this evening, about buses in their specific area. We can hear about that, and we can try and amplify those voices, get them heard by Somerset, get them heard by the bus operators, and to make it part of an overall strategy for going forward in Somerset. So what do we ask local representatives to do? Well, the first thing is they do as much as they can, and we don't ask them to do any more than they can. But what we would like you to try and do is to encourage the use of your local buses. Every bus operator will tell you, use it or lose it. And there's a lot of truth in that. We do need to encourage, not least because of COP26 and the green agenda and the climate emergency, for people to leave their cars at home, use buses more often. And it's by using your local bus service that you will make it better, and you will keep that local bus service. So probably the most important single thing you can do is to encourage more people to encourage their local bus service. And yes, to campaign for proper funding of buses in Somerset. And I know an increasing number of county councillors of all political persuasions, yes, all political persuasions. And because of the issues of buses, Conservative, Lib Dem, Green, Labour councillors are arguing the case for buses in their particular areas. And now we need to move that on to an agenda for Somerset more widely. So when Bus Back Better came along, Somerset got one of the world's leading transport consultants to work with their very skilled team in Somerset. They've got a very good team in Somerset on buses to see what needed to be done to improve buses in Somerset. And they produced a remarkable 180-page report identifying all the problems that I've just mentioned earlier on about the poor bus services in Somerset, recognizing that that needed to be addressed. And they put a price on it. And that's now been submitted to government. It was submitted at the end of October. And now we're moving on to the next stage, the enhanced partnership. And there are boards and stakeholder groups on which Glenn and I are both members, which are looking to try and translate that bus service improvement plan, something called a BSIP, into an enhanced partnership. And that's got to be done and finished by the end of March in 2022. That's a very, very short timescale, because as we all heard earlier on in this meeting, buses are all about detail. So there's an enormous amount of detail to work through. But in that BSIP, in that 180-page document, they said it is an ambitious plan, and it is from Somerset County Council. It does focus on revitalising the bus service. It is about the green agenda. It is about reversing the decline in local bus users. And it is about making Somerset a centre of excellence for rural bus services. And that's what Somerset County Council is saying. It's not what Somerset Bus Partnership is saying, it's what the County Council is saying. But we support the County Council in that BSIP to the extent that we've written to the Prime Minister, we've written to the Transport Minister, and we've written to all our Somerset MPs saying, please back this Somerset BSIP bid. Because this bid is ambitious. It was, the government asked for it to be ambitious. The Somerset County Council brief to their transport specialists and their consultants was to be ambitious. And so it was. The bill over a 4-year period is £165 million. That is a huge and absolutely massive amount of money, but that's to address the problems of buses in Somerset, if we were to do it in a short space of time. We're asking that money from the government. It's already clear that lots of other local authorities are asking for a lot of money. And at the moment, the pot of money isn't going to be enough to go round. But that's what the government asked us to do, was to each local transport authority to be ambitious. Somerset has been extremely ambitious. And we think that in January, the crunch time will come when we hear whether we get all the 165 million, which would be wonderful if it were to be the case, or if we get a proportion of it, whether that's a large proportion or a small proportion. But even if we get anything, that's got to be better than where we are today. And that does mean that our bus services in Somerset are going to get better. But they will only get better at the moment if the funding comes from government, because Somerset County Council is currently saying that they won't themselves increase their budget that they spend on buses. We think that that needs to be reviewed again, because their own report says that they should be spending £165 million to get the bus services in Somerset up to a standard that the Bus Back Better programme has said should be a standard operating across the country. Just to give you an idea, you can't see all the figures here because of the screen format. Currently, Somerset is spending just under £3 million on buses. They're actually asking for 50 times that amount to start to quickly address the problems facing Somerset bus issues. If you could see the rest of the chart, which I will send on to you, Somerset is spending significantly below the average for our neighbouring counties. They would need to increase the budget by roughly 40%, so add another £1 million to their annual budget. And I think that should be the campaigning slogan, to add £1 million to our budget for the next financial year. Because we can't just ask the government to spend a huge amount of money on our buses and not say that we're not prepared to do something ourselves. Somerset's identified the problems, they now need to be addressed. So, as I said, Somerset Bus Partnership is about encouraging the use of our local buses. That's to be done very much at a local level. And if you have the time, to encourage, to talk to your county councillors, most of whom are prepared to talk about buses whatever their political persuasion, because they know it's an important issue in their areas. And so that's what the Somerset Bus Partnership is about. It's very challenging, but because we are going to get some money, I'm sure, from government, things are going to get better for buses. And so the prospects are better going forward than perhaps they've been over the past few periods. So I'll close this down and end my screen share now. There we are. We're back to you, Glenn. Over to you, Glenn.
Thank you very much, Peter. And I think you've clearly demonstrated, you know, we are up against it. It's going to be a hard struggle, but there are chinks of light, big chinks of light. And also, I think what we're most excited about is that the Somerset Bus Partnership has kind of opened up a lobby for buses that we didn't know existed. And as Peter said, we have something like 100 representatives who've come forward. So, you know, everyone wants to be involved. And I think what we must really be determined about is we're on to buses now. Buses are our way forward, and we're really going to push to have our needs met. And as Peter says, to encourage people to use buses. That's as important as it is to lobby for more funding. Is no good if people aren't going to get on the buses. And get on the buses, they've got to know the buses are there. So, you know, we've a lot of work ahead of us. Are there first of all, any questions, any comments about anything that Peter has covered? Anyone like to ask any questions or make any comments? No? Yes? Mick Larry? You have to unmute yourself, Mick.
Thank you. I think when I was listening to you before, Peter, you were saying that within the bus back better, in fact, there are no real new routes or an increase in bus routes. It's very much about supporting what we've got at the moment. And also, do we have any thinking going on about if the funding doesn't reach that 165 million, what our priorities would be for the, if you like, the bus partnership in Somerset, you know, in order to actually improve, but also the way that we try to move people more to public transport. Because what you did say previously as well, you know, the infrastructure is there, really, not like trains where you've got to put new railway lines down and so forth. The infrastructure is there. So, you know, we could make a big change in terms of public transport.
Yeah. I think one of the most interesting things is the digital services which Somerset is looking at and which have been pioneered very much in South Somerset, looking at variations on the slinky services which have already been mentioned. I think for rural areas, the more extreme rural areas of Somerset, those are a way forward, and they will be in many cases new services for those communities. In terms of bus routes themselves, the established bus routes are always an easier proposition than pioneering a new route. I know, talking to colleagues in Wells and the area around Wells and in Shepton Mallet, they're looking at seeing if they could establish a new route, for example, down to Castle Carey. And that is coming on to the political agenda because county councillors are putting that forward. I have a county councillor close to me who's advocating a bus route. I think it is important to work with our county councillors. They do have an enormous amount of influence. We need to work with them as partners. We need to support them. We hope that they would support us. But actually pioneering a regular new bus route as opposed to enhancing and improving an established bus route by bringing evening services and weekend services and increased frequency. I think those are the quick wins. To actually pioneer a new bus route such as Wells to Castle Carey is going to be more challenging, but there is a lot of interest in trying to push for that, and it's now getting onto the agenda. Whether it actually happens, we will have to wait and see, but it is on the agenda. So I think things are encouraging. The big step forward is that Somerset itself has written a 180-page report which identifies what the problems are and points to the solutions. How much money they will have to share out, we will have to wait and see. Personally, I don't think it's going to be 165 million, but we're spending less than 3 million on subsidizing buses at the moment. Whatever it is, it's going to add a lot of impetus to buses. And yes, once they get told how much money they're given, they're going to consult again as to what the priorities will be. They will consult with the bus operators, but also they will consult with all the stakeholders, including the Somerset Bus Partnership.
Thanks, Peter. Roy Pumphrey, got a question?
Yes, I just wanted to make the observation that the 14 bus that goes from Cannington in to and fro the centre of Bridgwater also goes out to Bridgwater Hospital. So that serves anyone from a parish around Bridgwater who wants to get for an appointment or to visit to the hospital. So the very fact that that has a scanty service on a Saturday and none at all on a Sunday means it's not just Cannington that's being deprived. It means that there's no connection for anyone without a car to the central hospital facility. I thought that was a point I had made earlier.
Yep. Janet Keane.
Thank you. Although there is maybe some skepticism as to whether we will receive all that sum of money, do you think there will be criteria? For example, at the moment, the fleets of buses that we do have, many of them are old, diesel driven, and being old, they're very large, with perhaps 1 or 2 passengers at most. Will that money enable the operators to purchase electric or the hybrid electric smaller buses that are more economic and also more environmentally friendly? Thank you.
Peter, do you want to come back on that? Thanks, Janet.
A key part of Bus Back Better and a key part of the Somerset BSIP is transitioning the current diesel powered bus fleet by 2030 to being a completely electric bus fleet, possibly with hydrogen power in some cases, but overwhelmingly an electric bus fleet. So it is part of the green agenda. It's part of Somerset's green agenda. It's part of this government's green agenda, and that's why it has such importance, particularly just after COP26. The issue of smaller buses is something which gets raised a lot. During rush hours, often buses are full, and then in off-peak times, they can be driving around with relatively few people on. Bus companies can't have buses standing still. If they buy a bus, they need to work it throughout the day. So that's why sometimes we'll see larger buses with not too many people on. It'd be good to encourage more people to go on buses, and there is a need to look at fares to make them more encouraging for use. The other consideration with a smaller bus is it still costs the same amount to employ the driver, which is a big factor in the cost of buses, particularly of electric buses. So yes, the intention is, the commitment is that we will move towards an entirely electric fleet. Whether we will achieve that by 2030 will depend to some extent on how the money is prioritised that is allocated by the government. But that is the intention of both Somerset County Council and the government, that we should get to that point.
Thanks, Peter. Any other questions or comments? Can I raise, oh, sorry, Mick Larry.
Yeah, I would just like to come back to the point that you made, Peter, about the enhanced service, and that was something that the Somerset Bus Partnership was looking at. And what are we talking about in terms of the work that is going into this enhanced partnership?
Right.
Please, thank you.
Yeah, the enhanced partnership is primarily a partnership between the local transport authority, Somerset County Council, and the bus operators. This is, if you like, the really big change that's happened by Bus Back Better. We had Mrs. Thatcher deregulating buses some 30 odd years ago, and now there is a change, probably because, most especially because of the green agenda and the importance to get people out of private cars, particularly single occupancy private cars, and to get them into and onto public transport, both trains and buses. And the way of doing that is to involve local government to try and help fund services provided by the highly efficient, very effective private companies like First Bus, who is the dominant supplier in Somerset. Probably nobody can run buses more efficiently than First Bus. What we now need to be able to do with the enhanced partnership, Somerset County Council now needs to do with the enhanced partnership, is help ensure that not only are those services run for economic benefit, but also there is a social dimension to it, which can mean running buses in the evening and buses at the weekend, which might not be as commercially attractive, but does allow people to get to places of work and to hospitals, and to go out for an evening's entertainment as well. So that process of starting to talk to the bus operators by Somerset County Council is underway. It's actually was going on throughout the whole development of the BSIP over the past 6 months. It's now accelerating over the next 6 months. And Somerset Bus Partnership won't be actually involved in those negotiations. What we will be doing is saying to Somerset County Council, these are the priorities. These are the priorities we're being told by our area representatives. The importance of getting some type of slinky style service into rural communities, improving the times of buses, the frequency of buses, and probably identifying some of the routes which are the priorities, because it can't all be done. It can't all be done at once. There is a need for Somerset County Council to listen to what people are saying should be the priorities, and we are probably one of the most effective mouthpieces for that. So that is what is now going to happen, and it's a huge amount of work which Somerset County Council are now embarking on.
Thanks, Peter. And I think Peter has already said that the Somerset Bus Partnership is represented on the Bus Advisory Group, which is an important structure now for the ongoing negotiations over the enhanced partnership, and will allow us as well to feed in your comments. Can't see anybody else indicating. And we are.
It's David again. Just one other thing I wanted to share with you all today, because Lucy knows this as much as I do. I'm sure you'll get it through the RMT. At the moment, we get £226.5 million of government subsidy. This is not the Bus Back Better money. This is the COVID-19 bus operator recovery grant. That's going to become very difficult after Christmas if we don't get another amount of cash from the Treasury to keep those services going. So I just want to warn all councillors tonight that there's a desperate letters going off to MPs today asking for some more money to go into the recovery grant. Otherwise, First is going to be in some considerable difficulty maintaining lots of services after Christmas in the new year. So it's not the Bus Back Better money, as Peter Travis knows, it's the recovery grant, which basically is no buses commercial in Somerset or anywhere in Southwest England. It's all reliant on government money. So I just hope we're able to make and get everybody on board to get the government to part with some more cash to keep the buses running across the county. Okay.
Thanks, David. That's useful and timely. And I think those comments are in the chat box as well. If everyone knows how to copy the chat box, you just click on the two little dots and you can copy your chat box. So you've got all those links and all those references. So I'm going to start to wind now. I would just say then that December is the sort of vague line we've asked you to observe for completing the templates. So all of the things that have been talked about tonight, hopefully all of those can go in your template summary of services and facilities and if you can get those to us by the 10th of December, but there's no detentions for people who are late. We'll wait. We just want to get people moving on that because it's quite important. That's the first. The other thing to sort of suggest to people, if you think it's feasible, from has a bus users group and has had for a long time. Bridgewater would have had one by now, except this thing called lockdown came along, and just as we were starting to set it up, but we're going to get that going again in Bridgewater. That might be a useful thing to think about in your area, that if we're talking about promoting bus services, if we're talking about encouraging people to use them, as well as trying to get more money for them, then some kind of bus users group again keeps the profile high. It's what we've got to do. We've got to keep buses right at the front there. So if you have any thoughts on that, it would, it might be sort of perhaps not in your town, but perhaps in your area. If you've got any sort of wish to do that, please ask us for help and advice, because I think that would be a very useful, and it keeps us going, doesn't it? It keeps us high on the agenda. So I think really, that's enough sort of work to be getting on with. I just want to finish off by saying we haven't really established a pattern yet, but can we arrange another meeting? I mean, and any views as to how often you'd like to meet, or what? I mean, we're all busy people. I was thinking of a monthly meeting, but how do people feel about it? I don't know what you're thinking, Peter, in your area. Were you planning?
I think a monthly meeting or every 6 weeks, something like that, would be a good frequency, just to make sure that everybody's kept up to date with what is going to be a very quickly changing picture.
Exactly, yes.
Fine by me as well.
Yeah, okay. I see Janet is looking at 8. Has made a suggestion of 8 weeks. That would take us into, certainly give us time to analyse the templates. So early January, does that sound soon enough?
Fine.
Yes, 4 weeks from now is the 27th of December. There's something else going on around that time, isn't there? So maybe we better not plan too many things.
I would suggest that early January could be rather busy, because most of the local authorities are going to be doing a catch-up after the Christmas break. So perhaps towards the middle or end of January may fit in with most people's already listed commitments.
Okay. 17th of January, Monday the 17th of January. How does that sound? Do you know anyone can't wait that long? I'm sure we've all got plenty to do. How about timing? Is 6 o'clock a good time for people?
Yeah.
Would you prefer? It gives us an evening to enjoy afterwards, doesn't it? So shall we say 6 o'clock then on the 17th of January? by which time we'll have had time, hopefully, to analyse the templates that you're returning, and we'll talk about you know, bus user groups and see what progress. We'll get another update on where we are.
Yep.
Glyn, I'm always a money man, as you've known for years. Just to remind everybody, as a parish councillor, you've got to set your, and I've been one, set your local budgets. Please make sure you're covering your local budgets, the money to maintain and clean your bus shelters. So just, and Bridgewater Town Council, everybody else, just, we must have clean and efficient bus shelters. Sorry, that's Lucy's point, but I'll make it.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Okay, then, are there any other comments anyone would like to make? Peter, I think you're looking like you've got something to say.
Yes, just one more action point, if you feel able to do it. As David has mentioned, David is one of the Southwest's leading public transport campaigners, possibly the most highly respected by county councils and larger councils than that, the Combined Authority in Wecker. The point he makes is that the government is facing a decision as to whether they continue to fund bus services. A note to, doesn't have to be a long one, a note to your local MP, just expressing concern at the impact, the huge impact that it would have on your locality if the current bus services suddenly had to be cut back significantly because of the withdrawal of government funding, which has been in there because of COVID. We haven't recovered from COVID. We hope we will. So if you could possibly write a note to your MP about that, about the need to fund buses, that would
Actually,
be
it's probably one of the better
major help.
services, but it's only a very limited route.
Okay, thank you. And Carla, I think you were wanting to say something.
Yes, thank you. I'm just in response to David Wedgwell's comment about keeping bus shelters clean. Unfortunately, we don't have any bus shelters at all. And one bus stop has actually has fallen down, so is now not actually there to be seen as a bus stop. So we're in a desperate state.
There is a wide variety of issues with bus stops, I know.
Right. I got lost in Burnham the other day, leaving the rugby ground where I'd gone for my booster jab, and not a single bus shelter had any information in it.
Yeah.
Nothing, no timetables, nothing, never mind seats, just to know what bus was going, because I didn't know. I'm very good at getting lost. I'm not a good map reader. So yes, I mean, I think that's why we're not just talking about services, are we? We're talking about facilities. Very, very important.
Thank you.
Okay, then, if no one's got anything left to say, I'd just like to conclude by thanking you all very much. Thanks for coming. I hope you've picked up the sort of issues that we really want to drive forward. I hope you understand what we're about in the Somerset Bus Partnership, because you're now part of the Somerset Bus Partnership. But don't worry, there's no subscription fee. But no, thanks very much indeed. It's really encouraging for us to feel that people are getting involved and that we're going to get lots of information to pass on. So see you again, if not before, see you on the 17th of January. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Happy Christmas.
Yes, happy Christmas.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.